When I met Phil, there was still a whole pantheon of great local historians that we could look up to, from Esther Kramer and Jim Sleeper to Doris Walker and Barbara Milkovich. I was proud to help with whatever meager additions I could bring to the table, but I hardly felt essential. But the ranks of those giants dwindled rapidly, and at a relatively young age, Phil found himself in the unlikely position of elder statesman. Of course, he was up to the job. Phil found himself, but now, a few of us who were even younger than Phil now face the unthinkable. We are the ones left holding the torch that Phil was handed by Don Meadows and Jim Sleeper, and which Terry Stevenson in turn once passed to them. We cannot replace these giants. There will never be another Phil Brigandi. But because we share his mission, because we love him, we will do all we can to keep the flame burning, eventually pass it to yet another generation. In the meantime, we have work to do. The work of local history, the research, the writing, the publishing, the speaking, and the sharing. Phil Brigandi is not going to do it for us, and neither is anyone else. It is good and rewarding work, but it is hard work nonetheless. Now more than ever, we must all support each other in our mission.
Phil has been a member of the Orange County Historical Society. No one had ever been able to persuade him to join the board, and after hearing Mark speak, I think we know why. Despite years of asking by multiple people, he politely declined and then offered his reason by echoing the sentiments of Jim Sleeper. Are you getting anything accomplished, or do they just have you doing committee work? However, regardless of what he said, he gladly participated in most discussions about administration, content, and execution. And maybe he wasn't officially on the board, but certainly acted in the ex officio manner. His fingerprints are on nearly every single thing that we've done these past years. Like many of us, there were things that he said no to, but when it came to the Historical Society, that was not the case. And since I joined the board, and I fully admit I was the one doing a lot of the pestering, he was willing and agreeable, tackling whatever I threw at him without complaint. He never told me no. Even considering long-term tasks, he'd say, just tell me what time I need to be there. And he was. In 2011, he joined a small group of us, writing, reviewing, and eventually implementing our strategic plan. The Historical Society hadn't had one before, so it required months of in-person meetings, telephone calls, and emails that resulted in a finely tuned roadmap of what we needed to update and events we pictured for the future. In the long run, it was Phil and I who finished up the final draft, batting ideas around, imagining what we could accomplish while building the Society's membership. We had always recognized that most people were interested in joining their local history, their hometown, and that joining the Orange County Historical Society was often the secondary choice. So while there were housekeeping items to do, reviewing our bylaws, examining mission statements, we also thought about big thoughts that might draw others in, like jump-starting the Orange County History Conference, establishing history hikes, and introducing history mystery tours. And when it was time to review our bylaws, which sorely did need attention, Phil agreed to work on those too. Although whether or not he was as enthusiastic about them as other projects, I'm not really sure. But it was a task that would strengthen and make the society better. And within days, he had reviewed them, making suggestions that brought our organization into the 21st century. I always look forward to these collaborations since emails, telephone calls, and meeting in person weren't strictly business. Recognizing, even as a child, that local history was cool. I mean, who didn't have artifacts of the 1938 flood in their bedroom? I knew about Phil, but having run off to heaven, I had only met him in person a few times before he returned as archivist for Orange County. Once firmly back, and with his promise to never leave Orange County again, it was full court press. And yes, he probably hated using that sports term. Multiple trips to the archives, questions, emails, eventually day trips to the desert or missions. Yes, we talk about our research and publications, but we talked about his Thanksgiving camping trips in Lost Valley and his condo's problematic HOAs, his summers on the peninsula, and he'd delight me with tales of the old-timers and his pastoral histories with Lena Mae Thompson and his own beloved grandmother, Florence. And I was happy to listen because as we became better friends, we got to know each other better and eventually learned that his grandparents and my great-grandparents had come from the same small town in Pennsylvania. One of the other shared interests was hiking, so it wasn't a surprise when history hikes, one of the newer outcomes of our strategic plan, became a reality. Envisioning other methods by which residents of Orange County could experience our public history, hikes were a natural. So we began surveying and planning destinations that would appeal to novice and experienced hikers alike. We tossed ideas around, debating the benefits and challenges of Trabuco Adobe, Crystal Cove, and the Blue Light Mine in Silverado. On many of these hikes, Phil was often the hike leader and interpreter. We worked closely, he taking care of the physical hiking part, and I sort of managed things from behind the scenes. One year after mailing out a short questionnaire to participants, asking how people had heard about one particular hike that he had planned himself, I still recall his one-word response. Again, how he heard about the hike? Me, he wrote. One of the many goals that Phil wanted for the Historical Society was to resume our then not-so-annual journal. Offering to act as editor, Orange Countyana was relaunched in 2010, with Phil at the helm with a promise that it would be an annual publication. Soliciting articles and writing his own for inclusion, the journal has flourished, and true to his promise, he has edited them for the last 9 years. When it was time to revamp our website, we included Phil in our discussions. Never shy about voicing his opinion, he offered his suggestion from color, font style, to content and navigation. If you've read through our website, selected articles in our suggested bibliography relied heavily on Phil's knowledge of quality published works in our county. He was also one of our beta testers for several months before we finally released this newest version a few years ago. A logical choice, Phil was the man who refused to embrace most current technology and was a sun-type Luddite by choice. Moreover, future plans for the website included Phil's recommendation that we post our newsletters and eventually link to our digitized audiovisual recordings. The ability to hear one's voice, its cadence, resonance, and emotionally expressive qualities all contributed to the authenticity of the story. And Phil was always about authenticity. As a postscript to this, just the day after his death, we received word that our audiovisual materials that he wanted so badly to digitize had been approved for a small grant through California Revealed. And oh, how he wanted to listen to those programs. 57 recordings that capture Orange County Historical Society talks from 1966 through 1987, featuring Ellen Lee, Jim Sleeper, Leo Freeze, George Key, and the like, should all be available to the public in the upcoming months. As is often with the best laid plans, we frequently found ourselves without a speaker at the last minute. Phil was usually the first person that Chris called when we were in a pinch. And per usual, Phil always had a talk or two in his hip pocket that allowed the show to go on, even though he refused to use any kind of PowerPoint or technology. The talk should stand on its own, he said. Perhaps this may have had something to do with the great Knots technology debacle of 2008. But no one ever seemed to mind. Whether he was recounting tales from Portillo's trek through our backyards, or reporting on Deputy Juan Orozco, the first law enforcement officer gunned down in the line of duty, they could stand on their own. left to a master storyteller. There wasn't a monthly meeting where he wasn't one of the first people to arrive, helping to take down tables and chairs. Those of you who regularly attend may not know, but the room needs to be arranged every single month. And so even at the end, after speaking with people, he was one of the last few, putting the tables up, putting the chairs back up, and leaving them exactly the way we found them. And this was just the person he was, always helpful and willing to contribute, even in ways that weren't particularly glamorous or noteworthy, and oftentimes thankless. He was the consummate volunteer. For a while, late night, post-monthly meetings were held at the nearby Del Taco, where Phil, Chris, and I would catch up, discussing that evening's topic, our own research, and upcoming plans. Eventually, Plunkett joined our cadre of blurry-eyed and fatigued taco-eating historians. And it was there that the idea of our highly successful 250th anniversary Portola trip was born. Luckily, Portola's expedition into what is now Orange County coincided with the Historical Society's centennial celebration. While serving, once again, on the committee for the centennial year, Phil explained his idea of a bus trip with interpreted location sites. It was certainly an ambitious proposal requiring hundreds of hours of research at several archives throughout California just to get the story right. Many of these trips he made with Eric, who was on board and eventually co-authored the book that included additional research, including offering a fresh interpretation of their route through Orange County. This can only be described as a labor of love, the love of discovery, the love of Orange County, and all for the Historical Society. There was no financial incentive. No, the motivation was how he understood himself. As he'd often say, quote, "That's what a historian does after all. You gather up material and then you share it with people." However, as evidenced by all that he contributed to the Historical Society, it wasn't simply enough to share his research and his work. As previously mentioned, 2019 was our centennial year, and it became clear that those of us researching and writing about our own history would need access to the Historical Society's archives. Once again, I called upon Phil to help me get some control over our collection, which meant, in part, taking an inventory of what we had and figuring out where things were. Moreover, we knew we had to prioritize tasks and projects that would eventually lead to online finding aids and digitizing some of our collections. At least once a week, and sometimes more often, I'd pick him up at his apartment and off we'd head to the Heritage Museum of Orange County, where our archives were located. This usually gave us plenty of time to chat about all manner of subjects. Our travels, debate on which route was actually the best, the effectiveness of real ID, and always a piece of history one of us had recently picked up. We worked together there, but separately. He usually working in the physical files, and I taking inventory of what he was checking in our database. And like Chris's experience, our days were filled with conversation and laughter. He'd always find something amusing in our collection, a name, a photograph, and giggles ensued. And in between, we discussed the merits of arrangement. He wanting to file cities by subject, by alphabetical arrangement, and I suggesting that if one had a database, it really didn't matter. But we had so much to do, we fantasized over lunch what it might be like to actually get to the point when we were finished. As we worked, he'd regale me with stories of our society's early history, mostly concentrating on some of the more colorful members, as we dig through folders, looking for photographs that would end up in this year's journal, or in a slideshow at our annual dinner. His memory for detail was impeccable, and I was very often envious of his encyclopedic recall. Over the course of those many months, I calculated that we worked upwards of 500 hours by early June 2019. But then in the early morning hours of July 4th, a fire broke out at the museum, taking out the blacksmith shop, which was adjacent to the building that held our archives. eyes. Once we had clearance to enter the space, and learning that we'd have to pack everything up and put it into storage, it was Phil who I called first. Knowing that his commitment to the collection, or maybe he was just simply too afraid to say no, would result in his agreement to come and help me once again. It took us, along with other members of the board, 2 days to pack up everything, and he then spent another day supervising the professional packers as they whisked our boxes into his storage trailer for an undetermined length of time. But the archives, or rather I, wasn't done with Mr. Brigandi. Learning of an opportunity that eventually resulted in thousands of dollars worth of free archival boxes, I called upon him once again last summer for an opportunity to drive up to West Los Angeles to UCLA. Without hesitation, he agreed, and within a few days, we were off again on another adventure, navigating the freeway and the streets of West Los Angeles. This again clearly exemplified Phil's generosity to the society, but also to me personally. It would be remiss of me to ignore his other contributions that directly benefited the Historical Society. Always ready to answer our Ask a Historian questions that came in through our email, he seemed to answer them within a few hours, leaving me to wonder if he ever had to look anything up in his vast archival collection he kept at his home. When a few of us gathered to launch a new preservation group in Orange County, he was there. And he became our first interviewer when we restarted our oral history program. Phil was a gifted man in so many ways. His love of local history, which was enough to endear him to me, an incredibly generous heart, a good listener, a fabulous storyteller, and a loyal friend. He was a lifelong learner and mentor, a critical thinker with a keen ability for writing narrative, a man of scruples and principles who had a sharp wit and an impish smile. It's an immeasurable institutional loss for the Historical Society. For us as a society, he was constant. We counted on him in nearly every aspect of what we do. And now we need to imagine moving forward without his insight, his guidance, and his presence. However, for those who knew him, the loss is quite personal and profound, and we still grieve over his untimely death and mourn our unfulfilled projects and dreams of which he was a part. The poet Francis Duggan writes about a sense of place, expressing how I think about Phil and his beloved Orange County. Quote, "Where you feel a strong sense of belonging, contented to live amongst your own, where to anybody you are not a stranger, and you are loved, respected, and well known." Unquote. My emphasis has always been on telling a story, and there's a lot of them out there, left to be told, he wrote on his website. Indeed, he just wanted to tell the story, the narrative, and he did. And I'm so lucky to have been a part of that story, and he a part of mine, and he a part of all of ours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Plunkett, and I'm very honored to be on this panel with all these wonderful people, with all of their wonderful words that they had to share about our friend. I met Phil over in that building over there in 2012, an Orange County Historical Society meeting. I had already known Phil through his writings, and I had seen pictures of him. And so when I saw him, I was like, oh, it's Phil Brigandi. So I went over there, and instead of even introducing myself, I launched into a story about how I'd been doing research on this banded Juan Flores from the 1850s. And yes, Phil had encyclopedic knowledge. He immediately launched into, what have you got? And before I knew it, he was going, you have to email me, this is good stuff. Within a week, he's sending me superimposed maps of San Juan Capistrano, theorizing about what parts of the story happened in what adobes. That was how Phil was. He was just the most approachable person. He was somebody that immediately you could forge a relationship with. We started hiking together, And within a couple months, we were up in Trabuco Canyon. I remember it was a super rainy day, as it like always is when in the wintertime up there. And it was right after his good friend Jim Sleeper had died. And after the hike, we went over to where Jim's cabin was, Jim and Nola's cabin, and Nola's here with us tonight. And I just remember seeing in Phil somebody who cared deeply about people and cared deeply about telling the story of a place. Jim is a wonderful historian. I was a huge fan of his work, and I was excited to be at the cabin, and I could see how much Phil missed his friend. Phil has lots of friends who are so wonderful. I got to meet Chris and Steph, and I remember one day he said, yeah, I'm friends with Mark Hall-Patton. I knew Mark, sorry Mark, as the beard of knowledge from Pawn Stars. I said, no, wait, you don't know Mark Hall-Patton? He said, sure I do. And before I knew it, I was sitting in a booth at the spaghetti factory in Fullerton. And I just remember how kind Mark was and how much I was doing research on Richard Henry Dana. And Dana had a relative who lived up in San Luis Obispo. And I just remember Mark launching into knowing everything about him too. I remember saying to Phil, so do all your friends have memories like this? Comes with the territory, I guess. But Phil and I did tons of hikes all over the place, and that was kind of where he taught me about how to do history. And I remember there are many memorable ones. One of them was up at the Black Star Canyon Indian Village site. I've been there a bunch of times. There are metates ground into the rock where the Indians would grind seeds and acorns, the Indian women. And I've been there many times, and I was there with Phil, and Phil goes, well, you know, I knew the last Indian who was removed from her land, the Campano Indian removal in 1903. And she told me about grinding on those rocks and what, you know, with her grandmother and all the women from the village. And I was like, wow, what'd they say about it? And he said, well, they would gossip, talk about who wasn't there, you know, all the stuff that humans do. And there was just this great connection, right, to this history that otherwise I would have thought was lost. Phil introduced me to all sorts of people. John W. Robinson, the great mountain historian in Southern California, Dr. Bob Stankiewicz and Dr. Rosemary Beebe up in San Jose. We went out to dinner with them. They had written my college textbook on California, and here I was having dinner with them. And that was just who Phil was. He knew people everywhere. We were in Santa Barbara. There was a woman who was like, Phil? She knew him from the Ramona Bowl. We were in San Diego. We were at a restaurant. Phil? We knew them from, I was a historian who was from down there. Everywhere we went, he knew people. And everywhere, all those people that I got to know, and some of them I'm seeing for the first time. John, I've heard about you forever. Didia, Christopher. He always called you Christopher. It's wonderful to be in the same room with all of you. And all of us who I know were connected to Phil that I know personally, they're all such wonderful people who are interested in so many things and all share a common interest in really caring about others. But Phil took me on as a mentor. He wanted to mentor me to be a historian. I had the interest, but I was still new. I remember we went up to the Santa Barbara Mission Archive Library, and it was our first research trip together. And I get out my computer, you know, a former computer kind of programmer, and he gets out a composition book. And I look at it, and speaking of being a Luddite, right? And he says, I know, I'm old school. But it was great. We ended up taking so many research trips together. We were up at Bancroft. It was the same thing. We'd always just be doing research together, sharing with each other, getting shushed by all the archivists. Yeah, I remember one time we really got in trouble. We had one of Judge Benjamin Hayes' scrapbooks from the 1860s, and we were trying to see part of it. We were lifting it up, and I was trying to get a photo of it. And I remember the archivist looking inside, and Phil said, "Don't mind him, get the picture." When we took these trips, we would visit all the historical sites around California. We ended up, I counted it up, we went to 16 of the 21 California missions together, 3 of the 4 presidios, many of the missions more than once, as I'm sure some of you have been with him. One story stands out. We were going up to the Bancroft one time, and one of his favorite missions was Mission Soledad. And Soledad is one of the smallest and poorest missions. It's still owned by the same Rancho family that got the Rancho grant, Sobrano's family. And we were driving up, and a storm was coming in. It was in the afternoon, and it's close enough to Monterey and Salinas that you could just feel this cold, cold air moving in. It was like standing on a bow of a ship. And Phil loved Soledad. And we went in, and I remember we were in the church, and it was just, it was windy against the wooden doors, and I was like, where's Phil? And he was off in a little side chapel, and up on a bulletin board, they had prayers that are symbolized as small little tokens called milagros. And I went to go see Phil and see what he was doing, and he was I could see he was almost in tears. And he goes, these are the prayers that the parishioners are sending. And almost all of them were little homes. And home meant a ton to Phil. He spent his life writing about it. And I could see how much it meant to him to know that these people were just looking for a home. But Phil got me to start writing. And I wanted to, and I finally did. And my first article was on Richard Henry Dana at Dana Point. I tried to identify the cliff where he was, where they were throwing the hides off. And in doing the research, really, I was telling the story of Dana Point in the Spanish and Mexican periods. And I remember Phil fielded more than 100 emails from me, most of them very, very long, and he very patiently answered all of my questions, always. When I finally got the article done, after him editing it, he got it published for me. And then he said, hey, this is Bob. And he works over, he does stuff at the Dana Point Historical Society. You should do a talk. And so before I knew it, I was doing a talk. Phil was helping me learn all of the ropes. In 2012, the second time I met Phil, we went to Del Taco afterwards. And I'm sure a lot of plans are hatched in Del Taco or fast food places late in the night. I remember sitting there and Phil goes, in 2019, and I was like, 2019? It's 2012. He goes, yeah, in 2019, it's the 250th anniversary of the Portola expedition. I had to get over him calling it Portola. I was like, yeah, Portola. And I realized it was Phil Brigandi, and I felt I shouldn't correct him. He said, he goes, yeah, 2019 is the 250th anniversary. We should think about doing something for that. And I thought, yeah, wouldn't that be great? It's fun making plans. It's not always fun carrying them through. But Phil was that kind of guy. And about a year ago, he goes, so 2019 is coming up. It's time to start doing the work. And I had already started because I was so excited about working with him on it. He showed me how to write a book. And he drew on his experience working with Val Mathis in San Diego. He wrote 2 books for the University of Oklahoma Press with her. And he said, okay, here's how this is going to work. We're going to draw out, here's the table of contents. Here's what's going to include. You take this section, I'll take this section. And then when we finish, we're going to switch, and we're going to make notes. And we did that. And it was so much fun. As Stephanie said, it was just discovery and going through old documents, going through the archives. He taught me how to do all of that. And at the end, we made a book that I'm so very proud of. I remember at first we were saying, it's going to be a pamphlet. And as we did the research, we kept on going. He goes, we should probably start calling this a book. and then we did the bus tour, which the book was written for, and working with Chris and Stephanie and Paul Spitzeri, and it was just the most rewarding, ending to all of this little plan hatched in Del Taco that resulted in this. And I remember saying to Phil, wow, that was amazing. He goes, well, we're not done. Because now we have to go on tour and go do talks all over the place. And we did. We did talks all over the county. We did our last talk at the end of November. We went on a hike in Casper's. I remember they said, we got there and they said, okay, so you guys are going to use these walkie-talkies. I remember Phil looking at it like, but by that point, we had really worked it out. So many memorable talks that we had done just in the last couple of months. Dana Point Historical Society and at Casper's. I had the best time working with him on all of this. And I remember at Casper's, we sit in the car, well, that's it. We finished the last talk that was planned. I think we did like a dozen. And we had gotten contacted recently by Dr. Bob Sankovitz and Dr. Rosemary Beebe, the great early California historians in the state, and they wanted us to do a book. They're like, would you do a book on the Portola expedition? Not just Orange County, but the entire thing. And Phil and I jumped in full bore. 2 days before Thanksgiving, we were up in Santa Barbara, and Phil and I were taking the research trip. We were driving along, taking photos, trying to figure out where the route was. We were identifying Indian village sites. I remember we were standing on a knoll above the road in Gaviota towards Hollister Ranch, and that wasn't even just a couple weeks ago, right? And we were talking about, okay, so they would have gone here, and he was just fully into it. I remember we did the research in the archive, and on Thanksgiving morning I called him. He goes, well, it's been a long time. We spent a whole week together. And I just translated a letter. And over the next couple of weeks, we were making all these plans. The day he had the heart attack, we spent over 2 hours on the phone. And we were making trip plans and going over the research and all the responsibilities that we were divvying up, working on the book. We didn't tell Mark Hall-Patton, but Mark, we made plans to go up to San Luis Obispo with you. And
We'd already talked about that.
Good.
Yeah, no, we'd already talked.
I hope we still do it.
Yeah.
I do. And Phil was working all the way until the end. Right after that phone conversation, he sent me an email. And he said, I just went through a whole bunch of the Southern California Quarterly, and there are no articles that are relevant in there, but I did find this. I know, he knew I was writing about the Great Stone Church at San Juan Capistrano, so he sent me something, about that. And he ended his email the way he always ended up. All best, Phil. And an hour later, he had the heart attack that ended his life. Phil wanted this to go on, and I always said to him, I'm a huge fan of Terry Stevenson, Don Meadows, Leo Fries, Jim Sleeper. I said, Phil, you're next in that list. And he would always humbly say, well, God, I don't know. And it was like, well, of course he is. And Phil will always be remembered as that. No one can replace him, as Chris says, but we're all going to try. We've got to try, because it gets to the heart of what Phil's philosophy about all of us was. He believed place ties us together. No matter where you're from, being here, we're tied together in the fact that we're here, and the history of this place is our history. Phil dedicated his life to telling that story. And that story was really for us. It was to connect all of us together. And one of my favorite things he ever wrote, that he read to me many times, I know that he was proud of it too, because it summarizes what he was about. It's the beginning of his Campanio Indian removal article that was published in the Journal of San Diego History earlier last year. And it starts like this. Home, the place you're from. For most people, it is the center of their world. If they lose their home, they lose their way. For Phil, this was home. And all of us people are a part of that. And I'm going to do my best to continue to tell the story of home, to connect us all together.
I want to thank all my fellow panelists and our color guard and all of you for joining us this evening. Phil will live on in his many books and articles, which are, in many cases, the standard works on their subject. Future historians will continue to reference them the way we reference Bancroft, Sleeper, and Stevenson today. Phil's papers and personal library will also be available to future generations of historians through archival institutions here in Orange County. And as you've heard, Phil leaves behind those he inspired and taught to do good work. In the coming months, our society will publish a collection of tributes to Phil. And tonight, I'm also announcing the renaming of our soon-to-reopen archival facility as the Phil Brigandi History Room. Our historical collections were a cause he believed in, and to which he personally volunteered hundreds, nearly thousands of hours. A Phil Brigandi Memorial Fund has also been established by the Society to provide ongoing support to those archives. Phil's last published volume, a leaf book he wrote with Mark Hall-Patton celebrating the Orange County Historical Society's centennial will be available at the reception next door in a few moments after our program ends. I encourage you all to come over and join us for cake and lemonade. As Phil would have it, no brown liquids will be served. Nancy, you know. With that, I'd like to open this up. If there's anybody who, we don't have probably a lot of time at this point. It is getting somewhat late, but we have if anybody would like to take a few moments to share their thoughts, I will happily pass the mic around. Play Phil Donahue here and run out into the audience. Mary?
My name's Mary Hiroshima, and if it wasn't for the work of, well, a lot of the people at this table who are friends and mentors, the work of Phil Brigandi, I would not have been able to really start telling more of the story, finding the story of what is known as historic Wintersburg in Orange County, which is, Art Hansen mentioned, the 1986 historical building survey of Japanese American historic sites and structures in Orange County. And historic Wintersburg is the Furuta Farm and the Wintersburg Japanese Mission that is on that survey. And the oral history program that was talked about, a lot of the Japanese American oral histories are part of that effort. And I owe a debt of gratitude, and I just wanted to express that here. I am sorry I will no longer, although I didn't get that many emails because I learned early on, I've known Phil for about a decade, that he told me he really didn't want all these emails. And I thought first, well, he hates me. And then I learned, and I think it was Chris who told me, no, he just really doesn't care that much for technology. But I get every now and then from OC Kid a little encouraging note. And when I run into him, he'd check in and see how I was doing. And he knew that this was a difficult, and still is a very difficult battle, preservation and saving this history. It is not easy. And he knew that, and those little encouraging words meant a lot. And so I just want to express that thanks, and to his family to let them know that this continues, and it's a part of what Bill did.
I love that you were doing the work you're doing. So. We talked about it many times.
Thank you, Chris. Beck Curry from the Huntington Library as a reader, and also from the Los Angeles Corral of the Westerners, as well as the Los Compadres, Sherman Library and Gardens in Corona del Mar. Best kept secret in Orange County. Phil and I, we've known each other for the last 20 years, roughly, and we have had an ongoing project on the Irvine family in Toto, and yet to be published. We've been working together on this for a long time, off and on, that kind of thing. And the other one also, of course, is on Earl M. Jorgensen of Jorgensen Steel, as it relates to his stepson, Don Bren. And that eventually was going to be a fabulous story that will unfold in the not too near future, I'm sure. Those are two big projects that we've been working on together. And he was very, very helpful, both at the Sherman Library and Gardens, speaker on call at all times. And when somebody didn't show up, or somebody canceled out, that kind of thing. And the same goes with the LA Corral of the Westerners, which has been going since 1946. How many know Glenn Dawson? Glenn was a big player in that, major player, and of course Phil had a big play in that too, believe me. So we will miss him terribly. God rest his good soul. And his memory will live on, I can assure you of that. So, thank you, Chris.
Chris. Thank you, panel. My name is John Morlock, and I'm state senator for this district. I was a county supervisor and worked with Phil and with Chris. It hit me pretty hard. I got to the office and wrote a letter to the Orange County Register. Sent it off without having had my communications director review it first. She sent me an email, said there's a grammatical error in the letter, you should have let me see it first. And I didn't respond. I just walked over to her office and put an empty tissue box on her desk and walked out. So this was our first week back in session, and I had the privilege of adjourning in Phil's memory on Monday on the Senate, with the Senate, and also for others like Trudy Oleg Hall from Costa Mesa. We have some people from Costa Mesa. And Bill Popejoy, you mentioned the bankruptcy, and Joan Irvine Smith. So for the Brigandi family, I just want to give you a token of that from the State Senate for your archives.
I met Phil. He was 2 when I was a day old. I need reading glasses because I'm old. I just want to say thank you very much. I'll be missed. And I wanted to read this in memory. It's called The Parable of Immortality. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship is at my side, spreads her white sails through the morning breeze. And she starts out for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and of strength. And I stand and I watch her. And she spreads her wings under the clouds, and off she goes through the blue skies, through the ocean. And then she goes, and I can't see her anymore. And she's gone. Gone where? Gone from my sight. That's all. She is still just as large and as bright, and her sails as spread and wide, powered by the breeze. And she will still sail on the sea. And there will be somebody on the other shore seeing her coming over and saying, here she comes. God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else like to share something at this point? All right. Well, with that, let's get back up to the color guard.
Color guard attention. Audience, please rise. Color guard, advance. Color guard, prepare to retire the colors. Retire the colors. Color guard, regroup. Color guard, dismiss.
you openly.